Hi everybody, like Mark just said, my name's Megan. I'm here to talk to you today about what sort of happened to me at school with regards to sexting and how professionals dealt with it and sort of what I'm trying to do now to sort of change that. So I'm currently working with different schools in my area, the Police Chiefs Council and my local police. I'm working with the Diana Awards and fixes to try and sort of educate people on what to do and what not to do when dealing with children who are involved in these cases. So I was really badly bullied at school. Up until the point that my parents sort of decided that it was the best thing for me to move schools, but that was quite late on in the year, so sort of halfway through year 10 I sort of moved schools, so it was a very difficult time in my life. I'd been bullied, I'd suffered quite badly from mental health issues because of this, and obviously I moved schools. At the time, social media had just sort of become the frenzy. I unfortunately was on the cusp where all the new apps were out and everybody was talking about them, and so I had Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. And I was making all these new friends at my new school, and they were adding me on these things and we were chatting, and I was like so happy because this is the first time I'd ever had friends in my life. I'd never had that before, so anybody that wanted to talk to me, I'd talk to them and I'd feel amazing. So after sort of being at the school for about 6 weeks, I began chatting to a boy in the year above me on the app Snapchat, so you send picture messages to each other via that. So we built up a relationship, I'd say, over the course of about 6 weeks, and as you know, kids never put their phones down, so it's messaging all the time, every single hour, right up until you go to sleep, and then the next day when you wake up in the morning. And so you think 6 weeks, that's not a long time to know somebody, but for a kid it seems like forever. And because that constant companionship and the constant messaging, you build up trust. So about 6 weeks into it, he started getting a bit nasty. So he had been friends with people at my previous school and sort of said to me, well, I want you to send me imagery, and if you don't, I'm going to tell everybody about what I know about you. I'd started this new school, I'd started afresh, I was doing amazing, and you don't want your new classmates to find out stuff that you want to forget yourself. As I said, I was really happy to have new friends, and the thought in my head was that this could be massively jeopardised, like who wants to be friends with a weirdo? So the coercion sort of started from there, and I'd call it blackmail. So the pressure just kept on building up and building up and building up. And obviously I have my phone on me all the time, so these messages are just coming through every single day. So I'd say it took about 8 days before I sort of caved in. All these thoughts were going through my mind. Like Charlotte says, this isn't sort of an impulsive thing that children tend to do. You put a lot of thought into it. I was vulnerable, so I sent this imagery in the end after sort of 8 days of this pressure building up, and then all contact ceased for about an hour. So during this course of an hour, I said, well, I've obviously done something wrong, maybe I've offended him, maybe I'm odd, I haven't sent the right things. But sort of an hour after, I received a Snapchat, and when I opened it, it was a picture of a girl who was actually in my year group, who had been given permission by the boy in the year above to use his social media accounts to coerce me into sending the imagery. So obviously I opened this and I felt scared. I didn't know who to talk to, who to turn to. I just didn't really know how to feel. So my sort of first reaction was, if you turn off your phone, then you don't have to listen to it, you don't have to hear it, you can pretend that it's forgotten. So I went to bed that night, woke up in the morning and went to school, and everybody had seen it. It was printed out in the printer room at our school onto papers and posted around school. It was shared on social media sites. It was sent via WhatsApp, Facebook, everything. And so I got into school, and the only way I can describe it was I was surrounded like a zoo animal, with everybody looking at me, pointing at me. Everybody had seen a very intimate photo of me. I didn't know what to do. My best friend during this time was my rock. she was the one that convinced me to stand up and tell somebody, and if it wasn't for her, then I wouldn't have spoken to anybody, because there was no one that I'd been signposted to or felt that I could trust or talk to about this issue. So I reported it to my tutor, and immediately sort of my head teacher and pastoral care were told, and the teachers made me phone my parents myself from the school phone to tell them to come into school to tell them what had happened over the phone and what I'd done, which was not the right way to go about it, because I was obviously very distressed and just crying down the phone. And obviously my mum got a phone call from me crying off an unknown number, and she just went into sheer panic. And then having to sort of describe that over the phone isn't the way to go about it. The police were called straight away. 2 male police officers arrived in uniforms and a marked car, and I was taken into a room. I was questioned by 2 male police officers with 3 teachers, 2 of whom I'd never even met before in my life, and never come into contact with them, and my parents. And the way it was done, it was sort of like I was sat opposite the table being interrogated, and everybody else was sort of watching as if they were behind a screen glass, but I could see everybody. I was basically told by the police that I'd done wrong and that I'd be criminalised for it, and that it was my fault that I'd sent the photos, and if I hadn't have sent them, then I wouldn't be in this position. I can remember being called a stupid girl by the police officers. After this, I was isolated in school for 2 weeks, and I wasn't allowed into mainstream lessons, while the boy and the girl who had sort of worked together to do this were allowed to go back into lessons. Their parents weren't phoned by the police. Their parents weren't phoned by the school. So to everybody else that had seen this photo, there was this big uproar about it, and then I disappeared off the edge of the earth, and I didn't have my phone, so I couldn't contact my friends. I didn't have any support, and this was really bad for when the 2-week period was up and I had to go back into lessons. There was obviously no support for me at the school like they promised. And I was just sort of thrown in the deep end, and obviously all the questions arose, and sort of bullying started. I was being called names, made remarks that, it sounds quite trivial, but people would make sick noises whenever I walked past. And for a child of 14 who's very vulnerable, that's something that can be really hard. So then I had a second meeting with the police, again at school, again the same 2 male police officers in the marked car. So there was even more of a mad drama around that, and we sort of went away from that believing I had a caution, and that it would be on a CRB check, and it would come up that I had something against my name with relation to sexual nature. And I only actually found out, I'm 18 now, almost 19, and I only found out 4 months ago, I think it was, that I didn't actually have a caution. So during the period of applying to university, I sort of veered away from a degree that I wanted to do because I knew I'd have to come into contact with children. I haven't applied for certain jobs. I haven't done certain volunteer work with different charities that I'd like to, because I didn't think I'd be allowed to. So there was no follow-up from the school. They sort of promised me that I could maybe have counselling if that would help, or art therapy, but that never happened. I was sort of dropped by them, and it was never mentioned again. Social services were called because clearly by me doing this meant that my parents weren't good parents, and I think we had 3 checkups from them into my household, and my parents are now forevermore sort of noted on the system that they've had to have social services intervene with them. Like I mentioned before, I was suffering quite badly with mental health issues, and because of the way professionals and the teachers and everybody dealt with it, I sort of went back. I went back and I started self-harming. I started going back and having problems with my eating, and my parents have been amazing, and I wouldn't have got through it without them, and they were really lucky to be clued up on this sort of thing, and I had to have quite intensive rehabilitation and different counselling services. And I know since my experience a lot has changed, and the police do have different approaches and schools do have different approaches, but the short of it is it still isn't being dealt with right every time. And I think the growing upwards trend of sexting shows that it's not being dealt with properly. it's more than just embarrassment for a child. My mum actually turned round to me whilst I started getting into this and said, I didn't think you'd make it to your 18th birthday after that, because she thought it would break me that bad. And the only thing I can really say is education is absolutely key. Education for police, education for teachers, and education for children. I was never given sexual education. I never knew it was a criminal offence. I never knew who to turn to when it went wrong. The police didn't know how to deal with it, and the teachers didn't know how to deal with it. And the only way you can solve it is by talking about it so much and educating yourself and getting it right, because it can really have a big effect on children. That's all.